Hello, everyone, and welcome back to what is probably going to be a emotional episode for some of you because I am talking about what can be a pretty emotional topic for a lot of us, which is losing loved ones, whether it is because they passed away, whether it is because we are no longer in a relationship with them, whether it was platonic, whether it was romantic. It can also be grieving a version of ourselves. So we're going to go through kind of those three different forms of the most common ways that we feel grief. And I really wanted to touch on how we can grieve for ourselves as well, because often that isn't spoken about. So what I find is interesting that it kind of came through. I was setting up my little podcast setup in my studio, and I was just thinking about like, why do people ask me, not in like a bad way, you guys can ask, I love suggestions. They really help me to make episodes because, I'm doing a million and one things. And sometimes I'm just like, I have nothing else to talk about. I'm done. So they do really help me. So please keep them coming. But I was thinking about how it's really interesting that I get a lot of DMs of, do I have any episodes for heartbreak, for grief, for losing loved ones, etc., and how we're all dealing with the same thing, right? Which is grief. So all of you that are DMing me asking this, you're all dealing with the same thing essentially, which is grief. And it's interesting to me how we've overcomplicated how to deal with this. So you're all asking me, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this? How do I deal with heartbreak? How do I deal with losing someone I've loved? How do I get over this grief? And it's actually really simple. We're going to go into it, but the simple answer is, and you could honestly just end the episode here if you needed to. The very simple answer is you have to feel the grief. And so that is why a lot of us struggle to deal with grief. We struggle because we don't actually want to come head on with what we are grieving. We don't want to admit that we are in a phase of grief. We don't want to grieve. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to actually like come to terms with the fact that this person's no longer in our life, or we are no longer in this relationship, or what we thought we were going to have we no longer have. We don't want to feel that. And so we often shy away from the grieving process because of how like ugly it can be and how ugly it can feel. And I want to share with you guys, I have this mindset sometimes around emotion. It's really weird, but actually it's not weird. It's just like interesting compared to other people's perspectives of emotion. I find really deep emotion beautiful. To me, and this is not, by the way, I have not always been like this. If you don't know my story, I used to be an absolute cold bitch. I'm not that anymore. But many of you know that, but I'm not that anymore. The past, like, however many episodes, I've been crying at every single one of them. So definitely not the case now. But I used to be a really cold bitch. And like, I feel like I need to get my mum on the podcast one time because she just will tell you guys how it is, and she will tell you how I used to be and how I am now, because obviously she's seen the transformation herself. But I really used to think that emotion was such a sign of weakness. Like, hand on my heart, I really felt that. And I'm going to walk you through this in a second, but now how I feel about emotion and grief and sadness and pain and heartbreak is, it's like art to me. It's this like insane expression of our humanness that like makes me emotional to think about, which is kind of weird. It's this insane expression of our humanness that if I were to have a visual representation of it, it would be just like an abstract painting that is just wild and free, and there's no lines and there's no limits and there's no one size fits all, and it's really about like breaking out of your own box. That is what emotion, like full raw emotion, is like to me. It actually is like art. So if you ever will, we need to like pull these one time from like the video clips of the immersion. But when I'm doing, this really intense work and trauma healing work with some of you guys in person, my team, when they haven't seen me do it before, they'll be like, why are you like smiling through this? Like, why are you not crying? And because obviously it's really heavy. And sometimes like I really have to wipe away a tear because some of the things I'm saying, out loud to everyone is just like, I can feel how deep it's hitting every single woman in the room. But for most of the time, I'm like so happy as everyone is screaming and crying and just like so primal. And this recent New York one of the ladies actually said something similar to me. She said, during the anger release, for some reason, I was so happy. For her, she has always been really afraid of expression. And so there was this like belated like just joy moving through her body, because for her what it was, and I helped her understand this because I have the same thing now, is the beauty, the happiness, the frankly joy that comes with, wow, I am in a room full of women, or a room full of men and women, doesn't matter what it is. And everyone is just their truest selves right now. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't know what else could literally make you feel just buzzing with joy. When you are in a room with people that are fully accepting all of them, the energy is palpable. The energy is indescribable. So, grief, sadness, rage, anger, frustration, overwhelm, just the sometimes meltdown that we need to have as humans these days, there's something about it that's art. And when we can look at emotion as not something that has a label like it's weak or it's this or it's that or whatever, like let's not put emotion in a box, because you cannot put your expression in any kind of box. It wants to be free. And when we free our emotion, when we like liberate ourselves to actually accept our fullest expression, not think we need to like manipulate our expression, then all of this heaviness turns in, like, that's how you alchemize emotion. All of this heaviness then turns into what feels like art. It turns into this form of joy. You're able to actually hold that duality of how much pain you're in, but also the beauty of it, the beauty of like the rawness of the human expression. It's such a weird, like, it's not even weird, it's just this kind of like funny realization when you actually are able to like embody this experience. It's this weird experience of like just so opposite to how so many of us grew up. So many of us have grown up with these labels around certain emotions, and to free ourselves of those labels and to actually accept them. That is how we heal. So let's go into the kind of grief thing. So the number one reason why people struggle to heal from heartbreak, from people dying, from the loss of relationships, from the loss of a part of themselves, is they don't fucking feel it. That is the number one reason why people struggle to get over grief. And, you know, even from working with clients, there can be really intense issues that come up later in life for them because they have never grieved something that they have lost previously. So, for example, if you lost a parent young, or even not young, even let's say, I'm going to say young is before the age of like 32. That to me is pretty young. And I want to validate those of you that have lost parents, like, you know, at the age of even 30. It's really, I mean, I don't think it's easy to lose a parent ever, but especially when you haven't been able to go through the process of having kids or getting married or just doing those big life events that you want. Why am I okay? Something is up. Like, why am I'm getting like way too deep into these episodes. I feel like when I'm just channeling through an episode, it just hits home so hard. Okay. So when you haven't been through those big life events, it obviously becomes even harder. Now, what most of us do is we suppress that grief because it feels so ugly. It feels so overwhelming, right? Our nervous systems feel like we can't even feel it because it literally would crack us in half. It feels too much. Ladies, before I forget, I need to remind you, Queen Alchemy is open right now for enrollment, and this is the last round of the year, the last round. I know it is earlier than usual for the second and last round of the year. Usually it's a little bit later, but because your girl is becoming a wife, we had to do that a little bit earlier. And this is also going to be the last round where Queen Alchemy is this live. Yeah, this is also going to be the last round where it's like this, which is really bittersweet. I actually just recorded an episode and I started crying about it. So that might already be up for you to watch. You'll see it. It's just like a 10-minute kind of clip, a 10-minute episode of just like saying goodbye to Queen Alchemy or some kind of like headline like that. So you can go watch that if you want for all the details. But yes, this is the last round of the year. Please make sure you fill in your form ASAP because we already, well, at this point of me recording this little like ad clip, we are already half sold out. So we might only have a few spaces left. So please run, don't walk, especially if you've been sitting on the fence. This round is going to be a really special round because of everything that I was saying in that other like 10-minute Queen Alchemy spiel podcast that you guys can listen to when it's out. And let's jump back in. Don't forget to fill out your form. Don't forget to do the thing. Queen Alchemy is the program every single woman needs that she doesn't even know that she needs. And so because it feels too much, we go into that freeze response. So when it comes to your nervous system, basically how you get to a freeze response. So you're just kind of like disassociated, numbed out from feeling it. And you're like, I'm fine. I don't grieve. I don't worry about it anymore. But actually the grief is now manifesting in different ways. How that happens is you firstly have gone into some sort of like fight or flight in your nervous system. It's felt too much for your nervous system to handle. So now you've gone into a deeper state, essentially, of dysregulation in your nervous system, and you've gone into the freeze response and the disassociate response. It doesn't mean that even though you might not be able to feel the grief anymore, it doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean that it's not running the show half the time in your life or all the time. It's very much still there. It's just that you have learned to live with it. So now it feels normal to you. Just like for many people, they don't know what it feels like to have good digestion because they've been bloated all the time. They don't know what that feels like. They don't even know they're bloated. They don't even know they have bad digestion until they have good digestion. And they're like, holy hell, how did I live in that pain all the time? Like, I didn't even know I was in pain. You didn't know you were in pain, not because you're broken or anything. That's how humans are wired. So we will, once we realize we have to live with something, we're going to learn to what's the word? Adapt. We're going to learn to adapt to having to hold that grief or suppress that pain or whatever it is. We're going to adapt to it. And so we're not going to actually recognize the grief in our body. We're not going to recognize the digestive upset because we've learnt to live with it. We've normalized it for ourselves. It doesn't mean it's disappeared though. Now the grief is going to show up in the fact that you have commitment issues. So now the grief is showing up because you are so afraid of getting your heart broken by the woman that you're dating, or you're so afraid of getting your heart broken by the man that you're dating, right? Or now, for example, you just constantly have like one foot out the door. Like there is that commitment issue, because what if you what if you fully give yourself to somebody like you gave yourself to your parent, because that's your parent, right? Like that's just how biology works. And then they leave. It could be that now you are stuck in this really unhealthy cycle with how you talk about yourself, how you behave. It could be that now when you get really stressed and overwhelmed with work, you're so in your head, you're so disconnected, you're so numbed out, like people cannot feel you, they cannot have a conversation with you, and you basically feel like you can't even operate in society, for that week that you're really stressed at work. That kind of stuff. And there's many other examples, but just so I don't go down a rabbit hole, there's so many ways that the grief, for example, the unhealed grief, can then manifest. And we then normalize the commitment issues. We normalize the overwhelm. We normalize the constant stress. We normalize the insomnia. We normalize the digestive issues. We normalize all of these things that are not normal. They're just common. So if you don't heal the grief, it's going to manifest in different ways. Now, for those of you that are listening to this being like, holy shit, I have bottled up grief for 10 years. I am now fucked. And now I'm going to have all these autoimmune issues. I'm going to have the physical manifestation of cancer, because actually there's a lot of research that's now coming out of, oh my God, is it Germany or Denmark? I'm pretty sure it's Germany. Or is it the Netherlands? Oh shit. Anyway, I can find it. We'll actually just put it in the show notes. So Olivia, if you could remind me to get that. There's all this research coming out that's actually, they've been doing the research for a very long period of time. I'm really sure it's Germany. Anyway, they've basically finally been able to connect people pleasing, for example, with MS, or, parents that haven't healed from grief, for example, of losing a child, to cancer. So it's not to say that now like every single disease is caused by an energetic thing, but this is just the research of what I'm always talking about, of the energetic manifestation of the trauma. So we want to be looking after ourselves physically, but many of us are doing that, but we're still struggling with different things. And so there's going to be some kind of physical manifestation. Now, the physical manifestation might not show up in the next 5 years after the grief thing happened, but it might show up in 25 years and 30 years and 40 years. Good news is, it's never too late to heal the grief. Never, ever, 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 ever too late. there might be more of it to heal because you've kind of snowballed the grief. So the grief just started off, let's say, by the parent dying. But now what's been added to the grief is the way that you've abandoned yourself, the way that you've, not committed to the love of your life, and now you've lost her or you've lost him. It's been added to by the fact that you are constantly overworking as a way to not have to feel what you're feeling. So now your adrenals are burnt out, your digestive system is completely thrown out, your inflammation is through the roof. So of course there can be more issues because of the snowball effect, but it doesn't mean we can't undo all, if not the vast majority, of those physical manifestations. But honestly, the answer to healing from heartbreak, healing from grief, like moving through these really hard moments, is feeling it. And grief comes in waves. One minute you feel like, okay, you're fine, everything's good. And then the next minute something else triggers it. Even like we don't need to, here's the thing. Your goal should never be to get rid of feeling sad sometimes that you've lost somebody, because that is human. If you never felt sad again in your life for losing a parent or losing any kind of loved one, you've probably just suppressed the hell out of it, right? Or you have zero empathy and like you're not fully there. We'll just keep it like that. You either are so disconnected and so disassociated, or you have zero empathy, and there are a whole host of other issues that you're dealing with as well, because there's like something's not connecting, right? Every good human has empathy. If you're listening to this episode, you have empathy and you have compassion. So if you are not able to feel the sadness of a parent dying, a grandparent dying, a friend losing the love of your life, 3 weeks ago, whatever, if you can't access that and you can't feel that, it could be that you're actually over it, but probably not, because there's still going to be an element of sadness if you still want to be with that person, if it's like in a romantic relationship. And it's most likely that you have just suppressed it so much that you saying, I don't feel sad that my mum died, for example, is actually just a suppression of the grief. So I don't want to confuse you guys. Grief you can get over. You will not be burdened by grief for the rest of your life if you feel the grief, but there will be sadness. So to give you an example, my great aunt, we called her Auntie Deli. I can't say that. I'm wearing something of hers for, he doesn't fucking listen to this show. My fiance has listened to one episode. I'm wearing her pearls for one of the wedding days. And, my mom like dug up a bunch of her stuff and I'm incorporating it in my different outfits. She died a long time ago, but like even now, like I get sad thinking about it. She was the grandma that I never had. Whew. I swear to God, these episodes lately, like what is happening? It's the moon. Let's blame the moon. Okay. She is the grandma that I never had. One of my grandmas is still alive. I grew up with two grandmas and one grandfather. My mom's dad died when she was 14, so I never met him. But when I think about Auntie Deli, I get sad. Like, of course I do, because I'm human. When you want somebody to be alive, when you want someone to be able to, my God, we're gonna need to cut some of this shit out. Fuck me dead. When you want someone to like be at your wedding, of course it's fucking emotional. And of course it makes you sad, but I'm not stricken by grief, right? It's a different feeling. It's the acceptance of I'm human, and of course it is sad, and of course it's just like a bummer. Like is the best way that I it's not like a full visceral wow. It's not a full visceral reaction of intense grief. Like I can't do the rest of my day. When I think about her, I get a bit sad, I get a bit teary, and I connect with her. And she is my guardian angel. I talk to her all the time. And that's my relationship with her. And I honestly think that because I talk to her so much, just like when I'm channeling and for those of you that don't know, I'm like very psychic. So when I'm doing all of that, I talk to her and and I think that also means that because I still have that connection with her, of course, then I get a bit sad when I wish that she was around for something. But I would rather feel that bit of sadness that she was here than be so disconnected where I'm just suppressing a relationship that I really cherished and frankly I still cherish. whatever. We're not going to go down a whole personal route. My point is that when you lose someone that you love that has died, and that also can be a dog, by the way, because dogs are better than humans. When you lose someone that you love, that sadness shouldn't necessarily go away. I think for some people it totally does go away, but I think that we are invalidating ourselves and that we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves as humans when we expect the sadness to just disappear one day. Will it get easier? Yes. Will you no longer be grieving? Yes, if you process the grief. But there will be times when you wish that person was there, and you continuing to suppress your sadness, then that can turn into grief. Because when we suppress any emotion, it manifests into other issues. So I'm not going to like start bawling on fucking camera, but because that would not be productive. I have shit to do today. But my point is that for those of you going through the grieving process, the best thing that you can do right now is give yourself grace. Take a timeline out of it. Stop rushing yourself. Stop thinking that you have to be finished grieving at this point, because there will come a moment where you don't feel the depth of the grief anymore 100%, but don't give yourself this like false goal that you'll never shed a tear again, because you will. It's normal to. And if you don't, okay, you don't, but it's also so normal if you do. There's nothing wrong with you. And on this note, we can really make friends with just the human nature of death. We can make friends with the fact that we and our primitive brain knows that everything comes to an end when we allow ourselves to feel it, to accept it, to be sad sometimes, and to miss them, because you miss people that you loved. And isn't it beautiful that you miss somebody enough? That shows how much you loved them. If you didn't miss them, how much did you actually love them, right? So isn't it so beautiful that the depth of your love for this person means that you don't want to lose them, or that you are sad that they can't be here on that particular day? And we need to allow ourselves to, like, there's always new layers that we need to move through. So going on this note, for some of you, for example, that have lost your mum or your dad, you might be having the duality of the experience when you're bringing a child into the world, where you are so overjoyed with this child, but you are deeply, deeply sad that you don't get to share it with a parent. That experience doesn't make you wrong. That experience, and a lot of people do this to themselves. They think, I shouldn't be sad. I had this beautiful child. Like, I shouldn't be sad. Like, I have to focus on blah, blah, blah. Why is being sad that they're not there bad? Why is having the human experience of shedding a fucking tear a bad thing? When you love somebody that much, you want them to be there. So when we can actually change our perspective of sadness into, this is how much I loved this person, the sadness doesn't become such a like heavy thing in our brain. We're not critiquing our sadness so much. We're actually allowing ourselves to accept it. So when I'm thinking about Auntie Deli, or them getting sad, it honestly feels like love. Like my heart beats, like it beats this like bigger beat, if that makes sense. It feels like the beauty of love. It doesn't actually feel like sadness. Am I sometimes like a bit annoyed that the universe, God, whatever, like took her away so quickly? Yeah. But and this is also why I just love connecting to the universe, your angels, just getting into that channel, connecting to God, whatever it means for you, having that relationship with, whatever else is out there that you believe in. Because when I was in London struggling a while ago, when I was living there during the lockdowns, I was doing a channeling session and I was really deep, and I was really struggling with being so far away from my family and like not even having the choice to go back to Australia. This is when the wait list to get back into the country was like 3 months long, and like an economy ticket flight was like $15,000, and you had to go into the quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks. Like it was a fuck no. Like I'm not doing that. But it was really challenging to be away from them. Anyway, and it wasn't even being away from them because I live away from them now. It was actually just literally not having the choice to be able to get on the plane and see them when I wanted to. Anyway, my point is I was in a channeling session and she came through like super, super clearly. And I asked her, like, why did you, maybe I didn't even ask her this, whatever. The message that she gave me essentially was, and I literally heard it in my ear. And the message was like, I had to leave so that I could protect you. And she gave me like some other like specific information as well. But it was just this beautiful reminder of, our ego, our 3D like human mind just gets annoyed when people leave. We get annoyed when people die. We get so fucking angry in a sense. We are holding that pain of them not being here, but also like the anger of why did they fucking have to die? And I'm going to go into the anger piece in a second. But when we can still keep that relationship going with them, it helps us to, like, it really helps my heart, it helps my soul, and it can do the same for you. It helps you. And I do this in Queen Alchemy. We literally have one of the calls is like processing grief. And I literally walk you through a process to help you to connect to this person that has died, because it literally helps you to actually feel like you still have a relationship with them and to feel like they are still able to be there for you, protect you, do all of these beautiful things that come to the relationship. It's just that you can't see them with your own human eyes. Ladies, if you haven't seen that, I have put on another masterclass. Yes, we have another one. You guys have been loving them lately, and I have been adoring putting them on for you guys as just a little bit of a different medium other than just Instagram and the podcast. So, with that being said, if you haven't registered for the latest podcast, the latest masterclass, which is called The Blueprint to Feminine Embodiment, I highly recommend that you do. You guys know I'm going to break down all the bullshit that you see on Instagram. I'm going to give it to you really, really real. And obviously, I've been doing this, maybe not obviously, but I've been doing this work for going on 8 years. So I kind of know the truth and the bullshit. And we're going to go into the truth on the masterclass. So the link to register is below, and I hope to see you there. So on the anger piece, something that isn't talked about a lot when it comes to grieving is the anger that comes with it. People can get very, very angry. You're getting angry at the person, you can get angry at the universe, angry at God, angry at yourself. Like there's many different situations in which you can get angry to, but none of it makes you wrong. None of it is abnormal. None of it is something to be ashamed of. So a lot of people will feel very angry when the certain person has died, and they will then shame themselves for feeling angry, which further exacerbates their block from being able to process what is happening right now and the grief that they're feeling. So, for example, let's say that you are like, this actually happens a lot for clients. Those that have had a parent die, especially when they were younger, like below the age of 15, there can be a lot of anger, because even though like consciously they know it wasn't their choice, it feels like they were abandoned, and they're really fucking angry. They're really angry that mum died, dad died, grandma died, dog died, whatever it is. They're really angry about it. And obviously you can also have this when you're an adult too, but I'm just giving an example for clients that I've worked with. And this is a very, very common one where there's a lot of anger. And most of them won't be able to even admit the anger until I bring up how normal it is. And then they're like, I feel that. Like, I am so fucking angry. I'm so angry at my dad. I'm so angry at my mom, whatever it is. Or I'm so angry at God. I'm so angry at the universe. And because they've never allowed themselves to feel and process that anger, that also bottles up more of the heaviness of the situation, which they never release. You can also be really angry, if you haven't grieved a miscarriage, for example, or you haven't grieved the process of going through an abortion. That is a grieving of your own experience and, your baby. If you've never allowed yourself to grieve that, or maybe you've grieved it, but you haven't allowed yourself to be angry about it, you also need to grieve what you had to go through. So when it comes to grieving another person, grieving heartbreak, or grieving just like the loss of anything in your life, right? It could simply be like you are grieving the fact that you thought that you were going to have a particular life with a person and then the relationship ended, for example. There's many different things we can be grieving about. My point is that part of the thing you also have to grieve is the fact that you are going through this, the fact that you had to make a possible decision, the fact that you had to walk away from someone that you loved but you knew wasn't good for you. You're grieving the life that you thought you were going to have that now you potentially don't have. There's many different ways, but we need to also recognize that we need to grieve our experience. We need to grieve what we thought we were going to have, and we need to grieve the fact that we even have to go through this. So, quickly on the note of miscarriages, you also need to make sure that not only are you grieving, that baby, but you're also grieving the fact that you have to go through this. You're grieving the fact that you didn't have this beautiful, healthy pregnancy that you were thinking that you were going to have for yourself. If you have had an abortion, whether it was an absolute like easy decision or whether it was a challenging decision, it doesn't matter. You have to grieve the fact. Well, you don't have to, but I invite you to. You should grieve the fact that you had to go through that you even had to make a decision, right? That you had to, you know, that you had to do that. It doesn't matter whether the decision was easy or not. It's still a really hard process to go through. And so you have to grieve you. So let's not forget that whilst we're grieving the other person, we're also grieving parts of ourselves. So when it comes to let's go on a lighter note, when it comes to upgrading your life, right? Lighter note, when it comes to manifesting your dream life, or when it comes to having a big change in your life or a big season change in your life, you also need to let go of the previous version of yourself, and you have to grieve that version of yourself. So let me use like a very very light example. Okay, you have become a wife, you've become a husband. There is potentially a part of you, and not everybody needs to grieve, by the way, not everyone has to grieve this, but some people can feel really stuck when there is like a season change in their life, or they can kind of feel like a part of them is left behind. It's a very weird feeling. Basically, it's like a season has changed in their life. They're now, a wife, they're now a husband, they're now a parent, they're now, their business has taken off, whatever it is, but it's been this big kind of season change. And they can just feel really like weird in their body. And sometimes, obviously, there's nuances to this and context matters. And, I'm not in a one-on-one session with you, but sometimes that can be because they haven't actually like let their past self go. And it's not that you're like never going to connect with her or him again by any means. It just can mean that you actually, for whatever reason, need to grieve the previous life that you had. Maybe you need to grieve the fact that you are no longer single. You need to grieve whatever it is, like you're having your own personal experience. Everyone needs to grieve their own things, but there can also be grief when we are moving through different seasons. I know for me, I actually had to grieve leaving New York when I left New York, because I had that dream for literally like since the day we left New York City. My parents have told me this, I vaguely remember it, that the day we left New York to move to Australia, I was a shit show. I was young. I was in grade 3. But so I vaguely remember it. I was like 7. And apparently I was just like having fucking tantrums. I was so emotional. Like it was hell. I did not want to leave. And long story short, literally since the moment we left New York to go to Australia, my focus was get me back to New York. Like that is my home. And then I got my dream apartment in New York. I was living there, like I was living the dream in New York. And there was a dream beyond the dream that I never even let myself think of. I never had thought of there is something beyond New York. It was literally just New York. I'm going to, meet my man in New York. I'm going to live in New York. I'm going to have babies in New York. Everything is New York. Right. And so when I then met my fiance and then I moved to Atlanta, what I didn't realize at the time, because I was like struggling a little bit with like this big kind of ego death, and my ego was like really loud. And what I actually had to do was I had to grieve. I had to grieve this life that I thought I was going to have. Not because I was downgrading, I was fucking upgrading, right? But I had literally dreamed of a particular thing for such a long period of time, and I was stepping into something better. But it didn't matter that it was better. I still had to grieve this thing that I was holding on to. I was attached to what I thought was my dream life. And like, I am so, so, so deeply happy. Like, I am absolutely so glad that I left New York. Like, I need to do an episode on this, but if you've watched some of my recent YouTube videos, like, so glad. Now, when I'm back there, I'm like, get me out. I want my garden again. I love our house, our home. just like being in nature, having a garden, watering my fucking plants, sitting outside naked all day, like in the sun. Like I love it, right? So no problems there. But what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is that when you've held on to something for so long and then for even a positive reason, you're no longer going down that path, if you are holding on to it for whatever reason and clinging tight, you might need to grieve what you thought your life was going to look like in order for you to let go of that to then step into a better thing. So grief comes in so many ways. And, when I then moved to Atlanta, there was still moments of grief. Still to this day, sometimes there will be not necessarily grief because I really have processed that, but sometimes my brain will go, what would life have been like if I'm still living there? That's not wrong. That doesn't mean I want to move back to New York. That doesn't mean like I'm unhappy. That's called I have a brain and I'm human. And I am not shaming myself for having very normal, very human thoughts. Let me add this one. Clients will say to me, Monica, I'm in a happy relationship. I am married, 2 children, whatever. Like, I am so happy. I'm well fucked. Like, everything is great, right? But sometimes I think about my ex. Like, is that a really bad thing? Like, I feel so much shame for thinking about my ex. And I'll say, did you care about them? Yeah, like I was in love with them. They were my first love. Like, it was a very unhealthy relationship and I'm glad I'm not with him. Like, I'm so much happier now. Like, there's no part of me that wants to go back to him. But sometimes I think about him and I remind them that they are a human being with empathy. I think about my ex sometimes. My ex, I have a few. I think about them. I think about the past guys I fucked sometimes. And it's not because I want to get back with them. Hell no. It's because I'm human. And thinking about your past doesn't mean that you want to go be with that person again. Doesn't mean that you want to go back and live there again. It's just you're sometimes reflecting, you're sometimes thinking. Thinking about your ex doesn't mean you want to get in their pants. It doesn't mean that you're betraying your relationship and makes you human. And when we continue to judge our thoughts like they are like the demons inside of us, that exacerbates self-shame. We then disconnect from ourselves. We then lose our trust. We then feel guilty, and all of those things then turn into their own problem. So the more that we allow ourselves to process, to feel, to grieve, to move through, when somebody's unfortunately passed away, when a relationship has ended, when a new season of life is coming through, can you move with it? Can you process? Can you feel? Can you stop constricting yourself? Because if you do that, things become a lot easier. And just stop fucking shaming yourself. I cannot tell you how many of you shame yourself for your thoughts because you think that they are like so bad that you're thinking about your past or your ex or what it would be like to still be living here, what it would be like to still be single. There is nothing wrong with those thoughts. That is just called being human. So the last thing that we haven't really touched on is heartbreak. Am I that person that says, cut your ex off, never speak to them again, throw fucking darts at their face, burn all their pictures, write about all the reasons that you hate them? No. Not because you can't. If that actually makes you feel better, if that is a coping mechanism, maybe you need to do that. But for most people, that doesn't actually fix the problem. And going to sleep with somebody else definitely doesn't fix the problem. That's called self-abandonment. So don't do that. Don't just go and sleep with somebody else. What would Samantha say in Sex and the City? What would she say? I can't remember, but there was like a quote. Maybe we'll put it in like a little reel clip or something. My point is that just like I've spoken about with other forms of grief, the best way to move through heartbreak is to feel the heartbreak. Something people don't do enough that I do recommend with heartbreak as well is to make sure that you take self-responsibility for where you influenced the ending of the relationship, if that seems relevant for the context of your ending of the relationship, right? Because for some people, that isn't relevant for the context of the ending of the relationship, but that is the way that you are going to make sure that the next relationship is better. Majority of people, when they are, ending a relationship or when someone's broken up with them, they go straight to why they hate the person, why the person wasn't good enough. And that is their coping mechanism. That is their way of dealing with trauma. But what that can do for some people is put them into like anger and fuck you energy versus allowing themselves to feel the very real heartbreak. Even if that person was super unhealthy, even if you were in a very unhealthy relationship, you're still allowed to be sad. Because like I've spoken about, it doesn't being sad, grieving doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be back in the relationship with that person. You're also grieving what you had to go through. You still loved that person, even if it wasn't healthy, even for whatever reason, right? There's a million different reasons, but you still love that person. You still care about that person. You had hopes for your future. You're allowed to grieve that. You grieving an unhealthy relationship doesn't make you toxic. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. So make sure though, because people don't do this, is they don't take self-responsibility for what they influenced in the ending of the relationship. Even if you wanted the relationship to end, I still recommend looking back on how you could have been better in the relationship, because not because you're to blame, but also he's not to blame or vice versa. It takes two to tango, right? You also, like, even if he was like full, like an actual textbook narcissist, because you guys know I don't just put labels on things like that. Even if he was actually textbook narcissistic and super manipulative and like gaslit you all the time, even if he was like that, there was a part of you that agreed to that relationship. You agreed, right? Even though I know how hard it can be to get out of those relationships. I am not saying that you should have just gotten out. You should have just left. It's easy to leave a relationship. No, no, no. I know that in those situations, it can feel absolutely impossible. But, not but, and, not but, and. There was a part of you at the beginning of the relationship that agreed to all of this. You didn't see, you didn't choose to see, or you didn't choose to listen to some of those quote unquote red flags. Have you actually taken the time to reflect, or are you just going to keep doing the same shit in the future? So making sure as part of the heartbreak that you take the self-responsibility. When we then take self-responsibility, that then allows us to kind of unlock some of that grief that we are feeling towards ourselves. We need to also process the fact that we had to go through that. If it was a very unhealthy relationship, we need to process the fact that, like I've said a million times, we no longer have the future we thought we were going to have. We have to process the fact that maybe what's coming up is not just the fact that we feel abandoned right now, but this has been our whole life. We've constantly felt abandoned. So when you just shut out from the heartbreak or the grief, you also lose the opportunity to help your body to start to heal and unlock the previous trauma that you have been through up until now. So when you are allowing yourself to feel some of that pain of abandonment for the heartbreak now, you're also healing a bit of that and releasing some of that from the heartbreak that you've grown up with your whole life because your mom and dad were emotionally unavailable or whatever it was, right? There's many different ways that heartbreak can come through, and like feeling abandoned. It's not just physically abandoned, it's also emotionally abandoned when we're younger sometimes. So my point is that the more that we don't allow ourselves to feel, the more we stuff in our body, which creates tension, contraction, pain, all those unhealthy physical manifestations, whether it's like chronic physical health issues like back pain or gut issues, or whether it's procrastination, perfectionism, really bad self-talk, self-sabotage, right? There's a minute like commitment issues. There's so many different ways that it can also manifest just through like our personality, our actions, our lack of actions, those things, but also the physical manifestations. So even for some of you, like painful sex, painful sex can be a result of you never allowing yourself to process the fact that you did not get the love and the attention and the validation that you wanted as a kid. I mean, we could go through like the bajillion examples in here, which I'm not going to. My point is that when you are going through grief, you have the opportunity to stuff it down and create way more problems, or you have the opportunity to be a human. And part of being human is grieving, because we all know in the deepest part of our brains, like we know in our primitive brain, everything ends. When you love somebody so much, it's like on the same love and loss are on the same like spectrum, if you will. When you love somebody so much, you're also petrified of losing them. That is normal. I love my fiance so much, it actually annoys me. He's the same. This morning, I literally sent him a text. We haven't done this in like a little bit, so we were like so excited by it because we were just like really in sync. When we're like super just in sync with each other, we will text each other "I love you" at the exact same time, or like I'll be thinking something and he'll just say it. Like it's really wild. This morning, I just randomly, I wasn't even thinking about it, just picked up my phone and texted him "I love you," and he called me straight away and he was like, oh my God. I was like, babe, he was in the car. He's like, I was just thinking and daydreaming about how much I fucking love you. Literally, I was like, really? And he goes, I literally was just thinking, God, I love her so much. And he was just doing that like sexy man way, right? And anyway, my point is that when you love somebody like that much, where you are consumed by them, it's also very normal at the same time to be so afraid of losing them. The answer isn't then to not commit to them. The answer isn't then to run away. And for those of us that haven't dealt with previous grief, when we love somebody that much, that can force us to run away from them because we are so worried about losing them. When we can accept that we will lose them one day, like, fuck me, that breaks my heart, like my stomach just dropped. When we accept that though, we allow ourselves to love harder, to love more, to open our heart up to greater extents, to experience more, to receive more love, to give more love. And it allows us to also be more present and to love more because we accept, we don't love it. Like, I don't fucking love it, but we accept that everything that we love and everything that we hate, but everything that we love does come to an end. So instead of using that as a reason to then not love, use that as a reason to love harder. Because here's the thing, you're going to lose things no matter what. Things are going to end no matter what. Seasons are going to change no matter what in your life. If you are constantly worried about things changing, seasons changing, you losing things, or you losing people, and therefore not living your life, well, you still lost the things. I would rather, it's like that quote, whatever it is, but I would rather love and live and experience and enjoy the present moment so much, knowing that it's going to end one day. And I'm enjoying it so much because I would rather have that level of joy and love and lose it than never experience that level of joy and love and still lose it. So I feel like this was a really powerful episode. Just 46 minutes and 38 seconds of channeled fucking juice. I have to get on a team call. I love you guys. I hope this was really beautiful for you as well, because I felt like this was a really beautiful episode. If you haven't signed up for Queen Alchemy, this is the last round of the year, and also the last round where it's going to be held in like this exact format where you get this much live time with me. If you don't join this round, that's okay. The next round of Queen Alchemy is not starting until mid-March. There's quite a gap, about 9 months, which is quite long, because we have our wedding, then we have Christmas, and then we have my book launch. So it's just kind of like, unfortunately, like that timing of things. So if you don't want to wait 9 months, I would definitely suggest making things work to be able to join this round. We start at the beginning of July. I do not want anyone missing out. And if you have any friends that feel like they could benefit from this episode, please send it to them. I'd be really grateful. And I will see you guys next week on the podcast. Thank you.